Welcome back, dear listeners. Today is another captivating episode of STADIO Speaks. I am your host, Kanyisa, and today we have the immense pleasure of sitting down with a woman whose influence has touched countless lives and whose journey will inspire generations. She's an extraordinary figure, a visionary leader, and a true game changer in her field. Her impact extends far beyond her professional achievements. Join me today in welcoming our esteemed guest, Head of Marketing and Student Recruitment, Atelisha Harilal. Hi Atelisha, how are you?
Good, how are you?
I'm well, thank you. Thank you so much for gracing us with your presence. We look forward to having a deep dive with you and to getting to know you and your journey. So we're going to go straight into it with the first question. Can you tell us a little bit about your journey and how far you've come?
That's an odd one because I don't know how far back to go. Essentially, I was born in a really small town at a famous hospital, famous for the wrong reasons, I'd rather say notorious. So like at the R.K. Khan Hospital in Durban. And my parents were just normal, ordinary people. And I had a really good, idyllic childhood. We never had much, but it was really a fun time playing with my cousins, cooking mud and doing all of those things. I loved school, I excelled at school. I was really inspired by my teachers. I never really had a very possibilities of sort of learning more from anything other than books, and so I just became obsessed with reading. The first gift I was ever officially given was a book, a Peter Rabbit book, and it's still a book that I own today because it was the first thing I got that really mattered to me. So it stopped. I wasn't a child that played a lot or was outside a lot. I just spent my time reading. I made my brother get a library card by force so I could use it to get more books. And all I did is read, and therefore I really enjoyed school. I had some of the best, most dedicated teachers, particularly in languages, which is one of the great loves of my life. And I finished high school in Kwandengezi, which is a small township in Durban. And from there, I knew I wanted to study. I didn't know what I wanted to study, and I was working on radio at that time. So media studies seemed like the right thing, and then I got into university.
Okay, great. Maybe tell us about some defining moments in your career, where it started, how did you become a marketing guru, where did it start?
I think it kind of started mainly because I really enjoyed public speaking. And I started working on radio from 16. I was the youngest radio presenter at Radio ABH at that time. And from there, I sort of got into the studio recording adverts for various people who would come and say I'm this shop, I want to do an advert. And then they'd be like, oh, you work for us, you are the voice. And I ended up going into recording, and I sort of learned the entire world that's behind making a radio ad, production, jingle, creation, all of those things. And when I got to university, I became exposed to the larger world of marketing, advertising, economics, history, and I found that I really had a very weird skill set. I'm a giant nerd. I love to read books, so learning history, learning geography, learning theory is very easy for me. I suck at maths, so I sort of got into that mode, and I started working more and more on the back end of production. I produced a morning show. I still did my own show, and then time passed by and I realized I need to learn more about this. And then I got a job at the SABC very early on while I was still doing my degree. I sort of got into more the news and news production side of things, and that just added more skills because you learn how to coordinate, collaborate, work with other people, do things to a deadline, which is kind of a key skill. And from there, I sort of got into lecturing, so I ended up working at a tertiary education institution. I ended up teaching people journalism. And I found that it was really exhilarating for me, and teachers will know there's this time when you lecturing a class and you see something turns on behind their eyes when they get the concept, and there's this whole group of rapt people just staring at you, and I was like, wow, okay, this is unique. And then the students cross the stage and it's such a sense of accomplishment. And one of the people that in the college I worked at said to me, like, would you come with us? We're going to a school and there's a bunch of people who want to study journalism. So can you come and talk to them? And I was like, okay, cool. And when I did it, like, the presentation was meant to be 45 minutes and we spent 3 hours at the school because the students had so many questions and, you know, they wanted to chat to you. And I sort of got involved more and more until I was asked to apply for the post of sales manager, which I did and I got. And from there, things just escalated. And it was sort of, I'd gone to university to learn journalism. I ended up doing also a major in advertising and history. And so it sort of brought together all of the various interests I had. And I started studying more and more. You know, you want to learn about digital marketing, branding, etc., etc. But at the very basic level, I think this job is all about people. You understand what they want, what they're intrinsically looking for, what their desires are, how they want to be recognized and validated, and then you build on that. Everything else is just an expression of that.
Lovely. And as a successful woman in your industry, what advice do you have to other women who want to get into a very male-dominated space?
Firstly, I think you be prepared to be the first. When I was a sales manager at like the other largest listed entity besides STADIO, I was the only woman in the room and the only person of color in the room. And as times change, things evolve. Here at STADIO, when I first got into the level of, I was also the first in the room. So when you are the first, you know, you feel this kind of pressure that everyone else like you will be measured by your productivity. And so you always you feel this pressure to make the best statement of yourself at all times so that they give other people, other women the opportunity. And I think that like makes a weird kind of pressure on yourself that you shouldn't actually have. Being yourself, being authentic, being present is sufficient. And if you want to be in those spaces and you are the first, then you must make it your job to empower those who you want to come after you and give them opportunity and give them space to be. I think that's the most important. It's not about where you end up, it's how you make a pathway for others to get to where you are.
So with that being said, how do you handle the challenges and setbacks when you are the one who's like the first in a room?
At the beginning, you don't. And I think that's a reality I needed to learn to deal with, is that failure is inevitable at the beginning and setbacks are inevitable because you don't know everything. And oftentimes, you know, the funny thing I always say is like everyone waits to be ready. When I have this degree, when I've studied this, when I've had this much experience, then. But life never presents you with the opportunity at the moment when you feel you're ready. You always get it before and then you're just jumping in and you thrash your legs and you try and swim. So inevitably you will fail. And I think being of the mindset that you kind of fail forward. So if you failed, don't sit in your failure and cry about it for so long that you forget what you need to learn in order to succeed the second time. We often fail. And what I try and do is, I've failed now, I've made a mess up, I own it. I say I'm sorry to the people I need to apologize to, and I reposition myself from there, learning from what I've messed up. So things will go wrong inevitably. It's what you do with it thereafter that is the difference between growing or staying the same.
Where do you get your confidence from?
I don't think I'm very confident, but I like to think, this is cheesy, but I often think, you know, I take my people with me in a cheesy way. Like, I am the aspiration of my great-grandparents from when we didn't have anything and we didn't have education. I am the ambition of my mother who never had a chance to study. And when I speak, I am the power of all the thousands of ancestors who dreamed me in this moment, who thought someone they loved is going to achieve this someday, will have the money to live this great life, will have the position to influence the way people think. So my confidence is not necessarily about me, it's about all the people who brought me to this moment. And I always think when I move through the world, I am the realization of someone else's dream. So I can't play small because that would sort of hurt all of those people who suffered for me to be here.
I love that. And with that being said, where do you draw inspiration from? Who are your role models?
I'll say my mom, firstly, because my mom didn't get to university, but she sort of started a business and grew it to the point that she's traveled the world. They own their own freehold home, literally from rags to riches. So she's always persisted, despite the fact that she didn't know much. She had to learn about business. She had to learn how the world works in essence. She figured it out and she made something that paved the way for all of us. So firstly, I'd say my mom. And then I always try and take different things from different people, because I don't think there's one person who will fully be everything you need as a role model or as a mentor. And through the years, I've sort of worked with so many great people, Tama Meskin, who was one of my lecturers, who had this incredible charismatic presence when she spoke, and she's one of the people I look up to. My very first boss, who was a female leader that I saw really making waves in the world, Cheryl Baxter, who ran an incredible team just based on her personality as a human being and empowered so many people. So I always aspired to be that kind of boss that I needed when I was 20. There's people within STADIO, all of whom have traits that I draw from. So I don't really have another main human being. I would say I'm aspiring to be Oprah or something, but there are traits from various people that I look up to. And I always try and say, it's a process of self-actualization. And I'm always trying to learn from other people to bridge the gap between who I want to be and who I am right now.
What significant changes have you witnessed in your industry throughout your career?
When I first started out, it was all about put things in the newspaper, do a radio ad, do a TV ad, and now majority of the spend goes towards digital, just on a very practical basis. I think there's a focus on authenticity, storytelling, sort of real texture, real world knowledge, and an emphasis on human beings wanting to be seen and understood by other human beings. That's what makes markets special now, as opposed to back in the day, a pretty girl and a nice picture and people were like, wow, I'm going to buy this lipstick. So I think times have changed in that way.
And what are the most rewarding moments or accomplishments that you've achieved so far in your career?
It's always more about the other people, if I'm honest. If I particularly taught a student and then I see them in the world flourishing, or I'm somewhere shopping and they come and they're like, oh, remember when you lectured us about this and now I do this? Those are very cool moments. When I see a really young team member join the team and then 4 or 5 years down the line or a year down the line, I see this person flourishing and being recognized by the rest of the business, that feels like a great moment of accomplishment for me, because I've made the environment, I think, where this person has succeeded. And personally, I only feel that I've accomplished something when I kind of break the expectations around that thing. So if people expected, for example, they needed 2 million to make an ad, and then I make an ad and it's brilliant and is watched so many times with nothing, I'm like, okay, that is a moment where I just pause and recognize we did something that was unexpected and sort of fiddled with people's expectations in the industry. So those kinds of things.
And what are some of the challenges that you think women have faced within the industry, like the barriers that they have to overcome? Or what barriers have you had to overcome?
A lot. I think when I started off, I was quite a young leader, so there was this expectation that my youth would prevent me from making the best decisions and understanding things thoroughly. That's number one. I think women in general always face a double set of expectations, because whether you're a judge or you're a policewoman, you're a professor, it's always expected that you are more emotional, you are more soft, you have to look after the kids, you have to be the best cook, you have to be mom that takes everyone to training, and you have to succeed at work. I think that's just a lot of pressure. And for me, it's about knowing that everyone has their strengths and weaknesses. You don't have to do it all in order to be successful. You get to pick and choose the components of your life that you want to participate in, number one. And I think there are so many barriers, from men who won't understand you and then won't give you a space to articulate your thought. It's having an environment which doesn't support women in the first place in leadership roles and looks at them as like tokens. So you're there, but you're not there to really contribute, you're just there. So, and all those obstacles can only be overcome by excellence. And it's not like an in-depth, lovely philosophical answer, but you have to be so good that they just can't ignore you. So if you put that pressure on and you take it up and you become this invaluable, immovable force, and inevitably people see that you are this person that they can trust, rely on, who'll always have the insight, who's working hard. But don't put the pressure on yourself to be all things to all people. You don't have to be the perfect mom, the perfect wife, the perfect employee, the perfect boss. You can only be so many things to so many people, and you get to choose who and when and where.
How do you define success?
Happiness, number one. I think the more joy you can find in doing things, even if the things are tough, then you're successful. If you get up in the morning and you feel like there's a sense of happiness that you get to work with these cool people, you get to make these cool things, then I feel like I've achieved something. I never want to feel like I'm successful, but then there's actually no joy in my life. I hate what I'm doing. I hate the people I'm doing it with. So that's number one. I think personal fulfillment and joy. And I think freedom. Being given the freedom, and probably it's because we never had money. Money affords you a type of freedom. You're financially independent. You move through the world with autonomy, being able to do what you want to do when you deem it appropriate to do it. You have no insecurities about how you will retire. Those things for me define how successful I feel I am.
And what are some of the lessons you feel like you wish you had known earlier within your career?
I think firstly, no one will always like you. I think women want to be likable, and sometimes if someone doesn't like you, that thing can weigh heavy on your heart. And younger me would be like, but why doesn't she like me? I'm so nice to her, she just doesn't like me. And I think if I had learned a little bit earlier that it doesn't matter if people like you, and not everyone is meant to like you. It's okay if some people don't like you, as long as you can still collaborate productively. That's it. Liking the people you work with is a blessing in this life. And I think, secondly, if I had learned earlier that I didn't have to shut up for me to grow, in fact, I needed to do the opposite. And I think so often we think, oh no, let me not say it. Maybe they won't like what I'm going to say. Or maybe this is above my pay grade to think about this or say this. And you just have this feeling. It's important to say what you think. You will either contribute something new to the discussion, or you will learn something new. Neither of those things is a loss.
And then what's the most important piece of advice you've received throughout your journey?
So, guys, it's not a piece of advice a human being has given me. I think in reading, there was a story, it's a Chinese philosophical problem, which is that a man goes around and he's selling shields and spears. And he says, if you take the spear, my spear is so good, it will get through any shield. And he says, if you take my shield is so good, it will block any spear. And so the Buddha said to him, what if I throw your spear at your shield? And sort of what that story says is that at any time in the world, you can be one of two things, and you can be the best of that thing. But sometime or the other, you will meet your antithesis. You will meet an event, you will meet something which will make you feel defeated utterly. And how do you answer that moment of defeat? How do you come away from it rediscovering yourself is sort of where the grit of life is. You know, you almost die, you fall over, you get sick, you lose friends, you outgrow relationships. All of those are where the spear meets the shield. And your perceptions are shattered, and you gather yourself and you move again. So those moments are the ones where you kind of need to set yourself up for those things. Those are the gladiator sort of arena opens up for you, and then you're there and you got to fight.
Can you share your perspective on the evolving role of women in leadership and the impact it has in society?
Look, there's this age-old thing that no, a woman can't be in the military or can't be president because, you know, one day when she has PMS, she's going to push the red button and nuke the world and shit like that. But I think women spend so much of time regulating their emotion and historically using at the expense of their own mental health, regulating the emotion of their family, of their relationship. And therefore, I think we are emotionally resilient. We have good EQ. We have a great grasp on sort of the mood and the motion and the environmental needs of others, which I think are all things a great leader needs to have. That's an insight into people more than an insight into process. Because anyone can learn a process. Working with people is a skill. So I think women have that skill in droves. What they lack is confidence to step up, to say, yes, I will do it, you know, and that is the important part.
So in our last episode, we heard that the women of STADIO basically run the company.
We do.
What would you like to say to the women of STADIO?
I am so blessed to be in an environment that is home to so many powerful, inspirational, exciting women. And each of them are so different. And that to me is an inspiration on its own. We're not all the same. Some of us are more out there and, you know, speak our mind and are wild and wacky like me. Others are more sort of calm, but then when you sit down to really chat to them, you find there's so much more beneath the surface, a world of experience of things they have done and they have explored. So I think our diversity is a thing that makes me quite proud to work here. And I think we've also prepared the way for a younger generation of women like yourself who are coming through the ranks. So the future looks bright. And I'm grateful for my colleagues and their presence. And as I watch them, I'm always learning new ways I can operate in this world. So it's a good space. And I'm proud to be here.
And what would you like to say to the aspiring women of STADIO like myself? Like, how can we take up space? How can we make moves? How can we prove ourselves?
I think the first thing is master your wheelhouse, which I say to all young people. If you're responsible for these 10 things, you become the best at doing those 10 things. You do it so well that people look at you, they're like, wow, she understands all of that. But that only happens through concentrated effort. And you know what happens in the human experience is that we're like, oh no, I want to grow. They just think I belong here. But then you're not looking at, am I a master of everything I have to do? Do I do everything to the nth degree that it can be done? Number one. Number two, no one is going to care about your growth and ambition. And I don't mean that in an awful way, but a lot of time we wait for our boss to come and say, oh, would you like to be promoted to manager? Okay, to do that, you have to learn 3 or 4 things. Meanwhile, it's us who have to say, listen, I'm looking for growth. I want to earn more. I want to be in a different role. I would like to study this. So if you haven't examined your own ambition and you don't know what you want to do, where you want to be, you can't express that in a KPI discussion. You can't talk about that in a check-in because you don't know it yourself. So do introspection. Think about, where do I want to be? How do I want to get there? What support do I want from a leader? You know, that kind of thing. And don't be afraid to have those discussions. A check-in shouldn't really be about, oh, I sent these 5 things, I've done this, that should be like only a quarter of your check-in. 3/4 should be, I am here, I've done this project, but listen, this is where I want to be. This is where I think I've done well. Here are 3 things from our strategic plan that I've accomplished this month. So that way you give your leader insight to say, I'm doing all these things. See me, notice me. I think that. And then thirdly is express yourself and use the latitude you have to change things. A lot of times we see that the machine is broke, but as young people, we just carry on. If something's broke, tell us how to fix it, and let's make the whole process better. I think that will be my takings.
That is the end of our interview. Thank you so much. To all our listeners, we hope you found this episode of STADIO Speaks as empowering as we did. Don't forget to subscribe, rate, leave a review if you enjoyed this conversation. Until next time, remember that each one of us has the power to create a lasting impact. Let's continue to uplift and inspire one another as we journey towards a brighter future.